Ryan Nelson here, and I've got a project coming up to where I'm gonna be in the backcountry for 5 days, and I need to decide which camera I wanna take with me. So on this trip, I'm not gonna be able to recharge batteries, there's nowhere to plug anything in. I'm just gonna be out carrying weight around and having to shoot this project on the batteries that I can carry with me. So I've been trying to decide between taking the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K or the EOS R paired with the Ninja V. Obviously, quality is going to be a big factor in which camera I want to take with me, but also size and weight and what I'm going to have to carry with me, physically carry on my back. Now, there are a ton of things that I can compare between these two cameras, but I've picked a few that I think might be very important to the quality of the final product, balanced with the weight that I'm going to have to carry with me. I do have a lot to cover between these two cameras, so if you're more interested in the physical setup, go ahead and check out my next video. I have a link down below in the description. If you're more interested in the quality, or both, go ahead and keep watching and we'll dive right into it. So part of this project is I'm potentially going to be in some very narrow canyons and want to get as wide as possible of a shot that I can. And I wanted to compare the Super 35mm sensor on the Blackmagic compared with the 4K crop on the Canon. I believe it's a 1.4 crop. If you ask a Sony guy, it's like a 9.8 crop, but you know, it's more like 1.4. So on this first comparison shot between the 17mm lens on the Blackmagic and a 17mm lens on the EOS R, I'm covering it roughly the same range with both of these cameras. It is slightly more punched in on the Canon, but that's because I have the digital image stabilizer enabled. If I had that turned off, they'd be pretty much the same coverage. Another side benefit of this comparison shot is I really get to test out the dynamic range in these two. It was pretty dark under this bridge, and then I had the direct sun behind it. So I did get to compare a little bit on how these two cameras hold highlights on a really blown out background. The Blackmagic is ever so slightly holding a little bit more detail in the highlights. Now it does have a weird like blue tinge to it when you really get in and look at it, but I was actually surprised at how close these two images look. The Canon does seem to have a bit more contrast than the Blackmagic. Now these are both shot at ISO 400, f11, and a 180-degree shutter, and both recorded in ProRes HQ. So I was actually surprised at how close these two images look to each other. It's really hard to say one is better than the other. The Blackmagic is holding highlights just ever so slightly over the Canon. Gets a point for that, maybe just by the glass of its lens. The Blackmagic takes it just by the glass of its lens. That's like skin of your teeth, you know? So moving on, another thing I think I'm gonna run into is having to shoot in low light situations, especially if I'm in a deep canyon that's very narrow. There's not gonna be a whole lot of light coming in. So I wanted to see how well each of these cameras holds up in a very low light situation. Lucky for me, I happened to be out at a stadium at about it was like 6 a.m. It wasn't 4 a.m. It felt like 4 a.m. I'm not a morning person. I did not have enough coffee in me for this, but here are the shots I did. Looking at the ungraded images, the Blackmagic does seem to be bringing in a little bit more light on the overall image. The big difference in the recording is the Blackmagic was shot in RAW, as to where the EOS R and the Ninja V was shot in ProRes HQ. Graded though, they look pretty similar. Again, both shot at the same settings, ISO 3200, f2.8, 180-degree shutter. I do see some slight variations. The EOS R seems to be maybe on the red side, as to where the Blackmagic maybe looks a little green to me. But if we zoom in on the Coke machine over here, we do notice that the Blackmagic looks more true to that Coca-Cola red than the EOS R, which is looking a little bit more orange. The noise level on both of these I think is pretty acceptable. If you really stare at it, you're gonna see the noise, but as a whole, I think they're both pretty close. So with the exception of the Coke machine, I found that these two images were pretty similar. A little bit of color shift, but that's something that can just be shifted back and forth in post-production. Not a huge deal. That Coke machine though, the Blackmagic is holding reds a little bit more true to form. Either one of these is doing pretty good in low light. Not disappointed with either one of these. Point for both, no points for either of them. Any way you want to deal those out, I'm fine with that. The big difference in these two cameras is the ability to shoot RAW with the Blackmagic. I've really been enjoying shooting RAW and having that flexibility. Like when I'm shooting photos, I've got that RAW photo, I pump it in a Lightroom, adjust it however I like it. If I'm off by a stop, not even a problem. And I feel like Blackmagic has really put this forward. It's been a really great thing to have in a video camera. I've been enjoying color grading more in DaVinci. I still can't edit in DaVinci, so my workflow process is kind of slow and tedious. So if I'm shooting RAW in Blackmagic, I process that in DaVinci, export it, edit in Premiere. Not the best workflow, but it's working for me right now because I know how to edit in Premiere, but not in DaVinci. But I wanted to compare shooting ProRes HQ on the Ninja through the Canon versus shooting RAW in the Blackmagic. So that opening scene, I'm gonna play it again, but that's what that was. Little comparison shots. With the opening shot here, huge difference in that rosé. It looks very red with the Blackmagic. It looks more orange from the Canon. Same thing where you're seeing with the Coke machine. Everything else I think is much closer matched. You really have to, pay attention to both of these to see the differences. They're a lot more subtle. The skin tone is definitely a lot more red with the Blackmagic. One bigger thing in this backlit shots that I noticed is the Blackmagic seems to be holding that shadow detail just a little bit more over the Canon. Now, one thing to note on both of these shots, I didn't color grade them to match because I was color grading one in Premiere and one in DaVinci. I just kind of went by eye and what looked good to me for that particular image. And this is where I ended up. Fairly close, not exact, but it kind of gives you an idea of one versus the other. So I'm actually fairly impressed at the quality of the raw image and the quality of the ProRes HQ out of the Ninja and how close they actually are. Like I said, the reds out of the Blackmagic across the board so far seem to be more accurate. But I wanted to do one more shot where I'm actually in an outdoor environment, camping, and take a look and compare these. So here I have a shot of a couple of chairs, campfire, morning light coming through. Again, the red chair, it does seem to be a bit more orange with the Canon and the Ninja. I get it. The reds are a little more orange with that setup. That's been settled. Everything else, I think the blues in the chair actually look maybe a little bit better out of the Canon. And the Canon does seem to be a little bit more contrasty, but that's something you can bump up and down in post-production, so not a huge deal here. But with these, I did want to punch into about 400%, something just crazy ridiculous you're probably not going to do, but just to kind of see what the difference is in how far we can actually push these images. So at 400% with the Canon, it definitely doesn't look amazing, but you can still see some detail here. You still see some detail on the rocks. You see his leaf sitting up here. You can see the detail in the smoke, and it doesn't look terrible. I wouldn't recommend punching in 400% for production. I just kind of want to look at this. So the Blackmagic is maybe a little bit better, given this is 6K versus the Canon at 4K. So obviously it's going to be slightly better. But I do see a little bit more detail on the rock, a little bit more detail in this piece of wood here that's on fire. And then again, looking at the highlights on the Blackmagic up here on the rock, it does look like it's holding them just a little bit more than the Canon is. Overall, looking at all these comparisons, I do have to say that I think the Blackmagic camera is the better overall quality of these two. Blackmagic 6K versus the EOS R paired with the Ninja V, shooting C-Log in 10-bit. That being said, I think the quality of the Canon is here, and the quality of the Blackmagic is here. Not that much higher. A little bit better, but overall, it's gonna take a lot to notice the difference in the Blackmagic. That being said, check out my next video about the physical differences between these two cameras versus the weight, the setup, the battery performance, the file sizes you're getting out of each. So I'll cover all that in this video linked up here. If you want to, go ahead and check that out. Do me a favor, if you like this video, if you find it useful, do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button down there. Hit that subscribe button down there if you haven't already. Leave a comment, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next time.